Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. Today, we're going to use Rachel Hoffman's book, Unfck Your Habitat, as a case study, a way to look at the systems of domestic maintenance. Now, this is a compressed structural companion to our deep dive, so we're here to analyze the system of mess, not just the mess itself.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with this quote. Hoffman starts here because, let's be honest, it perfectly captures that feeling of hopelessness so many of us have. You know, you look around your home, you feel totally overwhelmed, and you immediately think it's some kind of personal failing. But what if it isn't? What if you're just caught inside a machine with some really broken parts?
And just so we're all on the same page before we get any further, this is not a summary of the book. And it is absolutely not advice on how to clean your house. We are here to look at the whole thing through a systems thinking lens, to really analyze the structure of domestic maintenance itself. So, first things first, let's try to identify this invisible machine that we're all working inside of, the system of domestic maintenance. A huge part of what fuels this system are images just like this. We are constantly surrounded by these glossy, perfectly staged spaces that, as Hoffman points out, are pretty much impossible to maintain if you're living a real, actual life. This sets the bar impossibly high, and for a lot of us, it just creates this constant, low-grade hum of inadequacy. So, let's define what we're actually talking about here. A domestic maintenance system. See, it's not a single task, right? It's not just doing the dishes. It's this relentless, repeating cycle of using stuff, messing things up, and then cleaning it all. And the crucial part here is that it operates under this heavy mental and physical load that most advice on the topic just completely ignores.
Okay, so now that we've kind of defined the system, we can start to unpack the incentives that it creates. And what's really surprising is that the most logical response to how this whole thing is designed is often just to avoid it completely.
And this question gets right to the heart of it. This is what Hoffman calls the perfectionist's paradox. It feels like this uniquely personal, frustrating thought, but it's really a predictable output of the system's own flawed design. It creates this powerful, even if it feels totally backward, incentive to just do nothing.
Because, think about it, the cost of just starting is incredibly high. First, you've got perfectionism, which makes the goal feel like it's a million miles away. Then there's shame, which frames the whole mess as a moral failing, instead of just a logistical problem. Of course, our own mental health puts very real limits on our energy and bandwidth. And hey, if you live with other people, you have to deal with all these complex coordination problems. So with all those costs stacked up, avoidance starts to look like the most rational choice.
Now, these incentives don't just lead to random results. They lead to a very predictable outcome, what we can call the burnout cycle.
And here it is, the shame-mess feedback loop. It starts with avoidance, which is driven by all those high costs we just talked about. Well, avoidance leads to accumulation. As the mess grows, so does the shame and the sheer size of the job, which just makes you want to avoid it even more. Eventually, that pressure builds until you snap, and you get this burnout phase, what Hoffman calls marathon cleaning. It's this desperate, unsustainable burst of energy that, of course, leads to a relapse right back where you started, avoidance. This is such a brilliant way to illustrate the structural shift that's needed. On the left, you've got the marathon rescue. That's the burnout machine, the default setting for most of us. But on the right, there's a totally different model. Imagine your home isn't a showroom that has to be perfect, but instead it's a leaky boat. The goal isn't to have a flawless ship, it's just to stay afloat. And that requires low-effort, continuous bailing, not these heroic, exhausting rescue missions.
So the big question is, if this burnout cycle is so painful and just inefficient, why is it our cultural default? Why does this broken system persist on such a huge scale? Well, with this quote, Hoffman points to a huge reason why. This system isn't just about physical stuff, it's been hardwired with morality. We've been taught to see mess not as a logistical issue, but as some kind of deep character flaw.
So, this is the crucial point, right here. The crisis in perception is treating mess as a personal defect instead of recognizing a broken incentive design. We treat the symptom, the mess, as a moral failing of the individual when we should be looking at the flawed architecture of the system that produces it.
And this broken system isn't just floating in a vacuum. It's held in place by some really powerful forces. The way our culture moralizes cleanliness, the unequal social expectations for who's supposed to do all this work, and the simple, crushing reality of modern time scarcity.
All right,
Finally, let's zoom all the way out, because this system of domestic maintenance, it doesn't exist in a bubble. It's deeply connected to the much, much larger systems that shape our lives.
You see, your personal capacity to manage your habitat is directly impacted by these huge external forces. Demanding work schedules drain your time and energy. Digital clutter competes for the exact same organizational part of your brain. Housing instability makes building routines almost impossible, and your access to mental health care directly affects your ability to handle that heavy mental load we talked about right at the beginning.
And all of this leaves us with one last really important question to think about. If the state of our homes is a systems problem, what other things that we call personal failings are actually just systems problems in disguise? Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.